Five, four.
Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. Mrs. Hilbrick, will you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilwoman Solis?
Hello, I'm here.
Councilman Crocker?
Here.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
And Mayor Bachnight.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And Mayor Pro Tem Young and Councilman Lofgren will not be joining us this evening.
All right, thank you. If everyone will please rise for the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. All right. Good evening, Mr. Garza. You have any announcements and/or reminders tonight?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I sure do. I'll start off with reminders. We'd like to remind the public and invite the public to come join us and come light up the holidays with the Victoria Main Street program as we light the HEB Christmas tree on Friday, December 1st from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the City Hall courtyard. I'm sure you noticed the tree is going up today. The event will be live streamed courtesy of HEB on the main City of Victoria government Facebook page. And of course, special thanks to HEB for sponsoring this year's tree lighting ceremony once again. So we hope the public can join us for that. Immediately following that, the next day, on behalf of the Parks Department, we'd like to invite the community to the annual Christmas Parade of Lights, which will take place on Saturday, December 2nd at 6 p.m. The parade route runs south along Main Street from Goodwin to Church and back north on Bridge Street from Church to Goodwin. We encourage citizens to come early to find the best seat and stop by one of 8 vendors along the parade route to purchase food. Please note that streets will be barricaded early on Saturday, and the grassy area in De Leon Plaza will not be available for seating as that's closed off due to construction. On behalf of Municipal Court, Municipal Court will be hosting Cookies and Cocoa in the courtroom event on Wednesday, December 6th from 4 to 6 p.m. This is a come and go event, and Santa Claus will be present as well for photos. The public is invited to join us to meet court staff and enjoy some holiday treats. And I forgot to mention that we'll also have Santa Claus available on Friday at City Hall. In announcements, obviously with the holiday coming up, we want to remind the public that all city non-emergency offices will be closed on Thursday and Friday of this week due to Thanksgiving. Offices will reopen at 8 a.m. on Monday, November 7th. Details on library and golf course reopenings and garbage, yard waste, all those schedules can be found online in the news, but library will also be closed on Thursday and Friday, and I believe trash pickup will continue as... Okay, so usual Thursday pickup will be picked up on Wednesday. Is that correct, Mike? Yes, sir. Awesome, thank you. And of course, folks can always find this information on our Facebook page or again on our website under news.
Well, thank you. We'll go to public and employee recognitions.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, 2A is going to be the recognition of outgoing Library Advisory Board member. So council and staff would like to recognize Tony Vasquez. Mr. Vasquez served on the Library Advisory Board from 2017 to 2023. The City of Victoria appreciates your willingness to serve your community, sir, and presents you with this plaque in appreciation of your time and service.
And as you walk up, Mayor, I'll briefly start on our employee recognition. You might have caught it. It went out on our newsletter today, but we do want to recognize our Economic Development Director, Danielle Williams, for successfully completing the Texas Women's Leadership Institute. This institute was created by Texas Women Leading Government to increase the number of women who are ready to become city managers. The program is financially supported by TCMA and is part of a national trend of academies addressing the lack of female representation in the chief executive role in cities across Texas. As part of this, she completed coursework throughout this year. We, of course, have been extremely supportive of any professional development opportunity amongst all of our employees, but specifically amongst our leadership team. She took initiative in pursuing being part of this program, and so we're very appreciative of her continued focus in her pursuit for professional development. And so congratulations, Danielle, for successful completion of this program.
Well done, Mr. Williams. All right, items from council. Nope.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes. Okay, we'll go into citizens' communication. We have one citizen, Mr. Vonderau.
Hi, I'm Michael Vondro. I live at 2204 East North Street. Good evening, council and Mayor Balknight. And I want to thank Jesus for doing that mural on Laurent. It looks beautiful. It's almost finished. We have some serious water leaks at the trailer park, and last time we had a water leak, the plumber didn't put no gravel over it, and the city of Victoria truck got stuck, and they had to pay Allen's Wreckers lots of money to do it. And I hope this time the plumbers think to put gravel over their work, because it's the same scenario, and I don't think there's going to be no trash pickup Wednesday. There's no way for the trash truck to get through. If he does, he's probably going to get stuck and have to call Allen's Wrecker again. And I missed the trash pickup Monday because there's no way for him to come through because they just started tearing up the road on Sunday night, and they're still doing it. And I hope they don't come Wednesday because they'll probably get stuck. But no one gave like notice or what's going on, from the plumbers or the management and stuff. And it was flooded out on the house 2204 East North Street, where the tan house where they rent, and she can't even park in the driveway. And it's been a continuing problem, and by law, the trailer park owner is required to fix it. He's not doing us a favor. He's required to by law, and there's plenty of potholes that he hasn't fixed, and they're like a foot deep, and one ice cream truck almost fell over going through it, and I'm so scared the UPS driver is going to flip it or something, but that's probably the only way it's going to get fixed, if the UPS truck driver flips it or something. And they have to do quicker deliveries now because they got a pay raise and they're making $170,000 a year. And when you're paying that much for a delivery driver, they don't want you standing around. They want those wheels turning. But happy holidays to everything, and good luck, Representative Balknight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vonderau. Happy Thanksgiving to you. With that, we'll close citizens' communication, and we'll go into items with public hearing, item C1.
Item C1 is an ordinance amending the 2023-2024 budget of the City of Victoria and carrying forward encumbrances outstanding at September 30th, 2023. This item is on first reading.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is an item we bring to you each year to carry over outstanding encumbrances from the last fiscal year. So these represent contracts and purchase orders that were entered into prior to the end of the year for which goods and services have not yet been received. We review these items with departments annually to determine what does need to be carried over versus what can just be closed out. This action doesn't have any effect on budget amounts for fiscal 24, as we're going to carry over the budget from fiscal 23 to cover these encumbrances. And we just present this item annually as a budget amendment as a matter of financial transparency. And the next slide here, this kind of just shows a breakdown by fund of where these items are coming from. The total carryover is just under $31 million, which is primarily made up of construction projects. You'll see in our utility construction fund, we have those utility projects in the residential neighborhoods, as well as some sanitary lines and water lines. And then our general fund construction fund, the major one there is De Leon Plaza, along with UHV, Ben Wilson Corridor, and then our public safety design. But I'll be happy to answer any questions.
That UHV Ben Wilson corridor, that's part of their money that they're paying us to pay for that
Correct.
street, right?
Right.
Is that close to being completed? Oh, I'm sorry, you're not the one that would know that, you
Yes,
finance.
the answer is yes.
Yes,
They actually expect it to be open by the end of the calendar year to traffic, both directions.
great.
They've been working real heavy on landscaping. The last time I was going through there and continued on, and the clock tower.
Well, it's going to be
Another tower.
wonderful, but it'll be good when we can have traffic going both directions.
Yes.
Don't go through there right now, because you gotta go this way, that way, this way, and that way.
Like a
And
ski
finally get-
slope.
Yes, kind of, sort of.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We need to have a public hearing on this one, so anyone wish to speak on item C1, please come forward to the microphone. Seeing no one get up, we will close the public hearing and entertain any motions.
I'll move for approval of item C1.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve item C1. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item C2.
Item C2 is an ordinance calling a special election on February 3rd, 2024 for mayor of the city of Victoria.
Ordenanza convocando una elección especial el 3 de febrero de 2024 para alcalde de la ciudad de Victoria.
Good evening, Mayor Bucknight and council. This item is on emergency reading, so we will need an affirmative vote of at least 5 council members to pass this item. So the ordinance before you does order a special election on February 3rd, 2024 to fill the unexpired term of mayor. When determining how to fill the vacancy, many things had to be considered. So Article 16, Section 65B of the Texas Constitution states that by announcing his bid to run for Texas House of Representatives District 30, Mayor Bucknight automatically resigned his position as mayor. So that's your resign to run notification of the Texas Constitution. So we had to consider that first. And then we moved on to Article 2, Section 4 of the city charter, which states that in the event of a vacancy occurring with more than 180 days remaining on the term, a special election had to be called to fill that vacancy. And so the term does not end until May of 2025. So of course, there's more than 180 days left. Then we went on to Article 11, Section 11 of the Texas Constitution, which states an election must be held within 120 days from the date of the vacancy occurring. Mayor Bucknight announced his candidacy on November 13th, so the city of Victoria is required to have an election before March 12th of 2024. But the Texas Election Code then, Section 41-001C states that an election may not be held within 30 days before or after the date of a general election for state or county officers, a general primary election, and our primary runoff elections. So this created a period of time in which we could not hold an election. So seeing as the primary election was scheduled for March 5th of 2024, that left a blackout period basically from February 4th to April 4th, which is why we settled on February 3rd, right there before that deadline. So that brought us to the decision to hold it February 3rd of 2024. I'm going to go over a little timeline of some important dates that we've also figured in connection with this election. So we're going to order the election tonight, as long as that passes after your consideration. We will be holding an informational session next Tuesday, November 28th at 11 a.m. here in the council chambers for anyone that's interested in running for mayor, to kind of give an overview of the position and what the mayor is responsible for. There is a filing deadline of Monday, December 4th, 2023. That is shorter than normal, but that is based on state law, and these dates have been confirmed by the Texas Secretary of State's office. There is a deadline to file for a write-in candidate. It's the exact same day, Monday, December 4th. There's a deadline to register to vote on Thursday, January 4th, 2024. The in-person early voting begins Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. There will be no early voting, however, on Friday, January 19th, 2024, because there is a state holiday that day. That is Confederate Heroes Day, so we cannot have early voting that day. The last day to receive an application for ballot by mail will be Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. And the last day of in-person early voting will be January 30th, 2024. On the 29th and the 30th, as required by law, will it be both be 12-hour early voting days from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then on Election Day, of course, will be Saturday, February 3rd, of course, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then we will have to have a special meeting to canvass the election on Tuesday, February 3rd, to fall within the guidelines to canvass that election.
February 13th.
I'm sorry, February 13th. Sorry, February 3rd stuck in my head after the last week or so. So we do have a contract with Margetta, with the Victoria County Elections Administration, Margetta Hill, to conduct the election and early voting for us. So, and then there are, I believe she has 14 polling places listed that she'll be opening throughout the city to host host voting on the election day. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I will simply add that we do plan on bringing forward a budget amendment next month to account for the expenses associated with the special election.
Thank you, Ms. Hilbert. And thank you for your work in getting that together, and Mrs. Lacy too. I know it's a lot of intricacies that went into figuring out all those dates. Good job. At this time, we'll open a public hearing on item C2. Anybody wishing to speak on this item, please come forward to the microphone. Seeing no one rise up, we will close the public hearing and entertain any motions.
To call for the special election on February 13th.
Third.
Oh, February 3rd. I did it again. Did like
Got a motion and a second to call for a special election on February 3rd, 2024. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a supermajority. All right, consent agenda.
The consent agenda, item D1 is adoption of minutes of the regular meeting held on November 7th, 2023. Item D2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with John Wright Associates Incorporated for the purchase and installation of license plate readers not to exceed $374,009.47. Item D3 is a resolution approving the payment of TCEQ annual consolidated water quality assessment fee for wastewater treatment plants in the amount of $114,324.67. Item D4 is a resolution reappointing members to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals. Item D5 is a resolution amending resolution number 2013-193, approving change order number 3 to the De Leon Plaza expansion project with Logger Companies Incorporated. Item D6 is a resolution approving a professional services agreement with New Gen Strategies and Solutions LLC for the development of a stormwater drainage and water wastewater rate structures in the amount of $384,224. Item D7 is a resolution approving a contract for repairs to the Ethel Lee Tracy Park splash pad with Craftsman Commercial Playgrounds and Water Parks in the amount of $188,727.02.
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution approving the new guidelines and criteria for tax abatements for the city of Victoria.
Right, good evening, Mayor and Council. What I have tonight is a update and a review to the existing tax abatement guidelines, and we'll go through some of those changes. But first, a timeline of where we've been and where we are today. In July of 21, the tax abatement guidelines were adopted, the existing ones that are there today. In July of 23, the city engaged Hush and Blackwell to review the guidelines. You may remember them from the enterprise zone that we came and adopted for DTAR Hospital. And so we engaged Hush and Blackwell to help with drafting these guidelines, reviewing them for us, and providing us feedback with the existing or current trends in the tax abatement guidelines, and also comparing it to our goals and objectives in the Newmark Strategic Plan. And then on August 28th, we presented the initial draft guidelines to the Sales Tax Development Corporation. In August of '23, the existing tax abatement guidelines expired because they only exist for 2 years, and then you have to get them updated and adopted again. And then in September, we took the feedback from the Sales Tax Development Corporation and applied those changes, and that is what you have tonight for your review. So I'm going to run through these. There is a lot of words and text on here, but in the attached agenda, we had a draft of the criteria, and they're highlighted in yellow. So as we go through these, I'm going to touch a little bit on what these changes are and how we came to these changes. So in section 2.1, under authorized facilities, we expanded the list of facilities. And and that was so that it was consistent with the facilities that we would like to see come to our area based off of the Newmark strategic plan. So we added in the regional visitor amusement facility, regional sports facility, green industry facility, healthcare facility, and corporate professional headquarters. So if you think about that section, that's more or less when we establish and adopt these, it's telling everybody out there, all the companies and the developers, that these are the types of facilities that we want to see in Victoria. In section 2.2, the creation of new value, eligible property improvements must have a minimum productive life of 10 years. This is just so that in the event that they are redeveloping a property that is wanting a tax abatement, we want to make sure that that life of that new development will last 10 years, which is what the maximum allowable amount of years a tax abatement can be written for. So that's just to make it consistent with the agreements that we would enter into with these developers or companies moving forward. So the life of whatever they are doing to the property must be at the maximum of 10 years to coincide with the abatement terms. In section 2.7D, under economic qualifications, any modernization of an existing facility must also involve the adaptive reuse of an existing structure or building currently on the property tax rolls. So this, again, entails redeveloping an existing facility for if you're going under a tax phase in. You must be applying the abatement to an existing structure currently on the tax rolls. So if you're phasing in the tax abatement for redeveloping a structure or expanding on an old existing structure, we just want to make sure that it is existing and not a new build and an add-on. Section 2.14. This is a completely new addition to the tax abatement guidelines, and this is just to ensure that when we enter into agreement with these companies, they are building a facility that is environmentally safe for the workers that will be in that facility. All right, moving along, under section 5.2, contents agreement, there was an addition of annual certification requirements under this section. And so that is something that we usually ask for in the agreements. So basically, it's just making it known that we will look to have those annual certification requirements provided to us with the agreements. So that is the tax certificates issued by the comptroller's office. We'll look to see copies of those as part of their agreements. In section 6.2, failure to commence operation. Simply put, this is a clawback provision to ensure the facility project is completed and jobs are created within the agreed timeline. So as you can see, in the event that the facility is not completed and does not begin operation with the minimum required number of permanent jobs by January 1, following the deadline established in the agreement, no abatement shall be given to that tax year. So this is just letting folks know that if you do not proceed with your project, then we will not give you the tax abatement. Right. Under 6.5, this is actually another new section to the guidelines, a statutory tax lien, and this is the event that a project fails to meet the deliverables. A statutory tax lien could be placed on the facility or property for the duration of the tax abatement agreement, and this would secure payment of all the taxes for the facility or the property.
Danielle, before you go forward, can
Yes.
you go back to the other slide before that?
This one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And the failure to commence operation, is that just the abatement would not be granted if it was done just for 1 year or for the whole 10 years? Like if they were supposed to start January the 1st, 2024, and they don't start it then, you said that first year they don't get the abatement, so do they just lose it all completely?
If I understand this correctly, yes. If for whatever reason they aren't able to commence operation and they don't start their business and they don't get the jobs that they're saying that they will provide, we will not allow a tax abatement for that agreement term. So that could be 1 year, that could be 5 years, or it could be the max of 10 years.
Okay.
I think,
Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, depending on the term, yes.
yeah, it's kind of a combination, right? They don't get it for the first year, that's the first part. And then if they haven't met it, it's subject to termination.
Right.
In which case they wouldn't get it. But
Right.
But if they don't meet it for January 1, but then still meet it, I think that's really what we're getting at. If they meet it in the second year and the agreement hasn't been terminated, would that be available? That's the way I'm reading it.
Yeah, I
Right,
believe so.
Right, so if they don't meet their first deadline, then they don't get anything that year.
That
They would
year.
still owe everything. If they miss that second January, then at that point, we have the right to just terminate the whole deal, regardless of whether it's a 5-year deal or a 10-year. So there's kind of a wiggle room there of an
But if they do
opportunity.
meet-
But they would pay that first year of taxes if they don't complete it in that time frame.
But if they do meet it for the second year,
Then they get the remaining
Of the
of
term.
whatever the term was.
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, because it's kind of vague in there. I couldn't quite, I understood the first year, but I didn't know for that tax year, and that's why I was questioning it, because it's talking only about that tax year,
Right.
okay?
Any other questions?
So would they have the option to reapply for another abatement?
That I'm
Yeah, they could.
unsure
I
of.
mean, they could. I mean, there would be nothing that would preclude them from reapplying for something. But at that point, if they were already under construction,
Right.
I don't see how we would consider a tax abatement if their project is already, 75% complete, or something along the lines. To your point, though, Councilwoman Solis, we could add some verbiage to make it more clear that we're talking about 2 separate years. So for example, rather than it reading, jobs by the next January, we can always make it clear that it's the second, as opposed to next, we can always use word, we can incorporate a word like the second January or something along that.
Yeah, we could say January 1 of the second year
Of the second year?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am,
the term of the agreement. Yes, ma'am. We could
That
change
might
it.
make it more clear.
yes.
And I'm assuming that because of the language where it says shall be subject to termination, that's discretionary with the city, correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
And these guidelines don't mean automatic approval,
Correct.
right? They're just guidelines.
Right.
It's still at the discretion of city council on whether or not they approve any abatement.
Right. Once we propose an agreement, we will bring it back to council, and council has final decision on whether or not we proceed with that tax abatement.
And at which time there could be additional terms or something that any council
Right.
may want.
There
in
could be revisions.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
All right.
I think she's not done.
Oh,
I
there's
still
more.
have just one more. Statutory tax lien, we discussed that, and then also the automatic termination clause. We added that in there as a new one. And that's essentially if a company files for bankruptcy during that period of the tax abatement, the agreement shall be terminated. And that's it. Any other questions, comments?
Thanks for your work. I think it makes it a better policy.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
I move we adopt, or approve E1.
Second.
And a motion and a second to approve item E1. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution awarding the base proposal for the Springwood Medical Plaza 2 off-site public infrastructure project to Lester Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $709,775.
I will be an abstention on this item, Mayor.
Thank you.
And I'll briefly take this moment to officially welcome David Shevlak to you. We've realized that I failed to formally introduce him at a council meeting, but you've been with us 3 weeks?
A month now.
A month? Time flies.
Yes.
But he'll be presenting this item to you, and again, I apologize for not officially mentioning you are with us beforehand. But thank you.
Welcome.
Nothing official.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. This project is for the extension of a 12-inch sewer line from an existing 15-inch sewer line that runs along Spring Creek, west of Spring Creek, but south of the Zach Lance Parkway. This area will, this sewer line will open up this area for some potential future development by providing a sanitary sewer service for that area. Approximately 1,450 linear feet of 12-inch sewer main will be installed, as well as 350 linear feet of 8-inch sewer main and 4 manholes. 2 bids were received, one from Lester Contracting Incorporated, the second by Grace Floors and Construction LLC. It was determined from the selection committee that Lester Contracting would provide the best value for the city. At this time, we are recommending that we award the base bid to Lester Contracting. With a contract time of 300 calendar days, we are anticipating that they will start construction shortly after the first of the year in January of 2024, and then the project should wrap up completion in November of next year.
What does the additive alternative mean?
Okay, let me back up. I can do that. The additive alternative, what we had was 2 sections of this. This sewer line, the base bid was to cross the Rosenquist family property in an existing easement that the city already had in their possession. And it stopped at the property line of the Rosenquist. The additive alternate was to extend and continue the project on into the Springwood Plaza Medical Complex property. And at this time, there's no formal easement that is in existence. I think the city's in negotiations with Dr. Verma possibly on that. That's outside my pay grade, I'll say. And so this time, we're just proposing to stop at the property line, south property line of the Rosenquist property.
So can you go back to the map and show
Yes,
us
ma'am.
what the additive is?
Okay, what we're showing on this map, where the green line stops, that's the end of the project as far as the base bid goes. Further to the south, southeast of that, that's going into that Springwood Medical Plaza property. I think it's Diversified Properties
Right,
LLC.
yeah, diversified wellness, yeah. So the additive is not shown on the map,
No,
but the ad alternate, I should say, would have actually continued through that, I guess, rectangular-looking property, but it's stopping at the property line between Rosenquist and Diversified Wellness, which is Dr. Verma's development.
Okay, so, but up in the northern section, is that already hitting one of our sewer lines?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. There's an
There's a lift
existing
station.
sewer line that's flowing into the lift station there at Spring Creek.
I'll never look to the right.
And that way, that diversified wellness can decide how they want to develop. There's a location for them to connect in because they can't take that sewer line anymore onto Nursery. So
Okay.
everything that's there took the capacity off of Nursery. And whenever they're ready, there's a point for them to connect to right there.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions?
I move we adopt.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to adopt item E2. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4. Okay. All right, we're into city manager reports. Update on city's affordable workforce housing initiatives. And from the Victoria Housing Authority, Mike Etienne.
Yes, and good evening, Mayor and Council. So today I want to provide you a quick update on our efforts to bring more affordable housing, workforce housing to the city of Victoria. So if I can advance the slides. So in my presentation, Mayor and Council, I will cover the following. I will give you an update on the multifamily housing developments that we've been involved with. You can see them there, Enchanted Gardens, Fish Pond, the Victorian and Odom Street. I will also provide you an update on our efforts to bring more single-family houses for homeownership to the city of Victoria through the infill housing program. So after I'm done, I will pass it on to the Housing Authority, Ms. Tammy Emerson, who's the new Executive Director of the Victoria Public Housing Authority, to give us an update on their efforts to improve the housing authority. So, Mayor and Council, often we hear that the lack of affordable housing is a big city issue, something that you see in Austin, San Antonio, Houston, but it's actually becoming more and more an issue in the smaller, medium-sized cities like Victoria. Home prices, as you know, have been going up much faster than income. If you look at the trend, home prices have been going up, whereas wages, income have been somewhat flat, but going up a little bit, but flat. So if you look at Victoria, the median home price in Victoria for a single-family house is $230,000. If you want to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, you're looking at over $1,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. So it is becoming more and more unaffordable. So our comp plan, which is Plan 3035, acknowledge that and say that we must do more to make sure that our seniors, our first-time home buyers, can afford to live in the city. So you would ask, what have we done to bring more affordable units to Victoria? Well, so since 2020, we've been working hard to make sure we have more units in our community. So the first thing that we did is that we activated the Victoria Housing Finance Corporation, and we created the Public Facility Corporation to facilitate the financing of affordable workforce housing. And President Ricky de la Garza has done a great job leading the Housing Finance Corporation, as well as Ms. Scott serving as a board member. We've also lobbied the state Department of Housing and Community Affairs to change the tax credit policies, the housing tax credit policies, to make sure that smaller cities, less denser cities, can have an opportunity to get or be awarded a 9% tax credit project. We've also facilitated the construction of 3 apartment complexes with 311 units for families and seniors for a total of $59 million. We've also generated over $400,000 in developer fees to the HFC. So then the coffers of the HFC, we have that amount to make sure that we can do more affordable housing units. We've also created over 150 temporary construction jobs to these projects and generated or will generate over $200,000 a year in tax revenue to local taxing entities. So the first project that I want to update you on is the Enchanted Gardens apartments. So those apartments are for working families and individuals. They are not for seniors, but seniors are welcome, but they are primarily for working families. The apartments are located at 4601 North Bend, Jordan, and I'm sure all of you know where that is. It's at the corner of, intersection of Sam Houston and Ben Jordan. You just turn the corner, you will see them. The developer in the house, in the HFC, we have completed the development. So it is now open, it is fully leased. It is funded by the state, not directly by the city, it's funded by the state as well as private activity bonds from the HFC, or issued by the HFC. The HFC is also part owner or a general partner in this project. The developer is Realtex out of Austin. HFC, again, is a general partner. We have 8 total buildings on site, and it's open to all ages. And the target population essentially is primarily working individuals and families. So there is an income limit, so a tenant cannot earn more than 60% of the area median income. And you can see the table below. So if you're one person, you cannot make more than $30,780. For a 4-person household, $43,920. So the apartment complex has 168 units, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. The total development cost was $31 million. So the apartment provides lots of amenities. It's a gated community, 24/7 fitness center, swimming pool, has a dog park, spacious balconies, 9-foot ceilings. So again, it's a wonderful apartment complex, and it is fully leased. However, if you do want to be or get on the waiting list, you can call this number, 361-210-6733. So in terms of the rent, you can see that it's fairly affordable. So the average rent altogether is about $761. We have 48 one-bedrooms, and the rent for the one-bedrooms go from $372 to $792, and you can see the remaining units, what they go for. Again, a 2-bedroom at $447 to $951 is much lower than the median rent in our current community. So the rents are established by the state Housing and Community Affairs Department. The second project I want to update you on is the Fish Pond at Victoria. This is an affordable housing development for seniors. When we say seniors, we're talking about individuals 55 and over. Some of you may not think that's seniors, but the state thinks that 55 and over individuals are considered seniors. So this property, or this development, is located at 2313 Navarro. It's right behind the Shipley's Donuts. So the construction of that is supposed to begin February of 2024. So the city did support the project through a resolution, but it's funded primarily by the state 9% housing tax credit program. So this tells you who the developer is. The developer is Fish Pond. They do have a development in Cuero, which is fairly popular there. They are based in Austin. The target population, again, is 55-year-olds and older. And the income is the same as the others, 60% or less of the area median income. And it will have 75 units. Now, the developer is looking potentially at reducing the number of units to 68 to make it less dense, and also reduce the height from 4 stories to 3 stories. But construction is still scheduled to begin February 2024. This is what the building will look like. Again, gated entry, granite countertops, walk-in closets, 9-foot ceilings. It will have a dog park, community gardens, and of course elevators because it's for seniors. Again, if you want to get on the waiting list, you can call this number 512-627-8062. And this is what the rents will go for. 75 units, 57 one-bedroom, 18 two-bedrooms. And the average rent is about $620 a month. And the third project is the Victorian. This is another affordable housing for seniors. This project is located at 901 John Stockbauer Drive, across from Colony Creek. The construction is scheduled to start in March 2024. It is funded again by the state, 9% housing tax credit program, in a conventional loan that the developer will get. So this is the site plan. The developer is Realtex, the same developer that built the Enchanted Gardens. The developer's out of Austin. They're also currently ranked number 13th as the 13th largest builder in the entire nation. So we are fortunate to have a very good builder wanting to build in Victoria. So the target population, again, since this is for seniors, is 55-year-olds and older. The income limit is, again, no more than 60% of the area median income. They will have 2 3-story buildings on site. Again, this one will have 68 units, all 1 and 2 bedrooms. Total development cost for this project is $14.6 million, and it will bring over about $130,000 a year in taxes to our local taxing entities.
3:10, we just got 5 minutes left in this presentation.
Yes, sir.
So we're-
I'm going fast.
Yeah.
And these are the amenities at the apartment complex. Again, construction will start in March. This is what the rent will range for. So you have 68 units, 28 one-bedrooms, and 40 two-bedrooms. And the fourth project is the Odom Street project that we've been working on for quite a while. This project is on the south side in Silver City. It's supposed to have 324 units. Total development cost $81 million, but that project is currently on hold because of the economic downturns. The interest rates have increased significantly, so the developer has put that project on hold. In the meantime, we are working with another developer to build a multifamily apartment complex on the south side. And then finally, in my remaining few minutes, I want to give you an update on the single-family infill housing pilot program. So as you know, we have nearly 1,000 vacant lots with code violations scattered throughout the city. The liens, the code enforcement liens range from $100 to $60,000, but many of those lots are simply abandoned. The owners just abandon the properties, and it's costing the city over $100,000 a year to maintain those lots. That's to mow and clean those lots. So our goal with these lots essentially is to acquire them and transition them into affordable single-family housing for homeownership. We have way too many vacant lots, and we want to work with developers to build single-family homes on them. However, we do have challenges. And one of the challenges that we have is that those properties, vacant lots that you see throughout the city, are tax delinquent. In other words, the owner has not paid taxes, so they have essentially abandoned the property. Some of those properties have title reject issues, which means that they cannot even be auctioned off at the tax sales process. There is no chain of title. So those properties, Mayor and Council, could remain vacant forever because the title is just reject. It doesn't have a chain of title. So potentially the only way to address that is to go to the state legislature to allow localities to acquire those properties or condemn those properties. So what we've done, Mayor and Council, is we're partnering with Lineberger Law Firm to try to clear title on 50 properties to start with and bring them to the online property tax foreclosure auction. So we are hoping that this partnership with Lineberger can help us acquire those vacant lots. So Lineberger will clear the title and then bring them up for auction, and we, the HFC, the Housing Finance Corporation, could bid on those properties. And ultimately, our goal is to transition those properties to homeownership. So the HFC would purchase them at step 1 and all the way to step 6, where we essentially transfer them to private builders to build single-family homes for low to moderate income home buyers. So again, it's transitioning those vacant lots to homeownership. So Mayor, at this time, yes, if we don't have any
Okay, on that last
questions?
slide, when you have the homeowner, not the homeowner, you said builders. Could
Yes.
anybody else buy the empty lot if they wanted to build a house there and not necessarily go with the builder?
No, well, if that individual has the capacity, if they have the financial wherewithal, yes.
I was going to say, in fact, that step 3 where the HFC acquires the vacant lots, that would be, that they would be a potential buyer, but anybody could buy those lots from the tax sales.
Okay.
So I know time is short, Mayor, so at this time, I will introduce Ms. Tammy Emerson, the Executive Director of the Housing Authority, to give us a quick update on improvements at the Public Housing Authority.
Okay.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and it will be quick because I talk fast, right? So,
They balance each other out.
yeah, let's hope. Thank you for inviting me tonight and allowing me to present. I just wanted to go over quickly. I've only been here for about 8 months now. We had to count it out to see how long it's been. We've made some changes. Obviously, you guys have know that what the condition of the agency was when I came on, so there's been some updates and changes. We've actually updated our mission to make it more tenant-friendly and resident-friendly. So we're trying to enhance the Victoria community by creating and sustaining decent, safe, and affordable living environments for lower-income families, elderly, and persons with disabilities, and to foster that stability and self-sufficiency and a sense of community and pride in the neighborhoods where they reside. So we're trying to rebrand the agency to present that mission. So just to give you a little bit of background, the Victoria Housing Authority was established in 1950. We have 321 public housing units across 9 different properties. We have 354 housing choice vouchers, and then 15 emergency housing vouchers. The Housing Authority has a 5-member Board of Commissioners that's appointed by the Mayor of the City of Victoria. 1 board member must be a public housing resident or a participant in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We do meet once a month, and all of our board meetings are open to the public, and all are welcome to attend. And then, of course, Mr. Etienne is the assistant manager, is our city liaison that we work with. So who do we serve, right? Who does Victoria Housing Authority serve? So who qualifies? We're limited to the low-income families and individuals, and eligibility is based on the gross income, whether they qualify as an elderly person, a person with disability, or family, and if they have U.S. citizenship or if they're eligible immigration status. It's based on the HUD-determined income limits. For public housing, they have to be low income, which is 80% of AMI or below. For Section 8, they have to be very low or extremely low income. So the parameters change for the programs. And these are HUD-issued income limits that we have to follow. When I came, HUD had come and done right before I came, they did a review of the agency, and we were scored on 4 factors, which is management, physical, financial, and capital fund. As a result of that, we were designated as substandard management through HUD, so we've been working very closely with them to get us out of that. We also have low physical scores because our housing stock is aging. Most of our units were built in 1953, so we still have 2-prong wiring and some plywood walls. So we're working on redeveloping that. Management of our program, we've had occupancy issues as well as previous administration failed to submit their annual plans on time. So we've corrected all of that. So what our steps to improve are we're properly removing our units in order to do extensive modernization on the units when they're unoccupied. We're working with contractors to bring all those units offline to rental condition. We're holding now that all the COVID eviction moratoriums and all that stuff have been taken away, we're now able to hold our tenants accountable for lease violations, which we're doing that as well. We're making sure reports get submitted on time, and we're handling all things timely. Obviously, I meet with HUD about once a week, have conversations with our HUD field office in San Antonio to keep them abreast of what's going on and what improvements we're making. So we're in constant communication. Our current projects, with the help of the CDBG program, we are doing a Leary Lane window replacement and painting project. And then we're awarding a contract for, to have our offline units brought up to rental standards. Our next steps is we are heading towards repositioning. So we're going to be repositioning from public housing to the private market, which is what HUD is encouraging all public housing agencies to do. That's going to allow VHA to heavily renovate our units. There's a possibility of like thinning out some units, removing some units, building somewhere else, tenant protection vouchers, different options that we're going to look into. And it's going to allow us to get funding to be able to bring our units up to a better standard. Public housing cannot have any debt, so we can't have a loan or anything like that. So once we get out of the public housing market, then we'll be able to take on debt to be able to modernize. When we do this process, we will have to have full tenant and community support, which will require partnering with you folks. Then also, once we get that moving, then we want to start looking into different programs and allocations, such as like VASH, which is the Veteran Supportive Housing. We want to look into those to move forward. That's it. That's all I have. You have any questions?
No, thank you for buzzing through that and giving us the update. We do need that. I do want to recognize Raquel Garza.
Yes.
She does chair the board for VHA, and I appreciate her continued service to Victoria Housing Authority. She does a great job, so thank you, Raquel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mayor, real quick, it obviously goes without saying that, in order for us to truly make a difference in affordable housing, we truly do need to partner and collaborate with the Housing Authority. We can't do it alone. The HFC can't do it alone. They can't do it alone. And I do think we're, over the last couple of years, we've really improved that collaborative relationship, obviously even with the resurgence of the HFC. So I think it's just important that that continues. And so expect to hear from the Housing Authority, at least on an annual basis, because I do think it's important that we're in line and in tune and we're all moving in the same direction. And so if it's okay with you, Mayor, we'll move on to the second item.
Oh.
And in the spirit of annual reports, I know there was a time when we did have Texas Zoo representatives give an annual report to you during the budget process, since we do have an agreement with them that provides some funding. We figured now would be a good time. And so Sarah Hammond, who's the president of the board, is going to provide you an update on what has been going on with the zoo.
Good evening. So like Jesus mentioned, this is just an update of what we have been going on these last couple of months. First and foremost, we got to hire a new executive director, William Baker. We hired him back in March of this year. He brings to our institution multiple years of zoological management as well as just executive director leadership. Through his tenure, he's done multiple construction projects, master plans, and basically anything that you can think of. So we are super excited to have him on board and see what he can bring to our zoo. As you all know, we received a couple of funding from the City of Victoria through y'all's ARPA program, and about $500,000. This is to go towards 5 major projects that y'all approved back last year, I believe. The first project, we will be conducting a master plan to help further our future zoo and basically just get us pushing into the moving forward. We'll also be doing some hurricane and flood mitigation. We actually have completed half of this as of today. We got a redesign of our entire zoo electrical infrastructure, and hopefully we can get a contractor in there to update some of our electrical. It's a little outdated and has a couple of issues, which is not good for staff, animals, etc. This will also allow us to purchase a new generator for hurricane or just freezes, things like that, as well as a 4-inch trash pump. A couple of renovations that we will be using these funding for, we'll be doing some renovations for our Jaguar exhibit. This will include a new viewing kiosk and some reinforced glass just to kind of help the viewing of the animals. We'll also be doing some bear exhibit renovations. This is more extensive than our other exhibit renovations. We'll be redoing the entire animal night house, just upgrading it, adding AC, things like that. We'll also be doing some new fencing, new kiosks, and then repairing the gun night within the exhibit. We'll be renovating the ocelot. This is smaller in comparison to the jaguar and the bear exhibit renovations. It's mainly just to reinforce the structure and keep it safe for the public and the animals. All of these projects that we have been going through at the zoo will address both emergency and essential repairs that we've been needing to do for a very long time, but it also add aesthetic repairs as well. As you can see, here are some pictures of things that we have already done throughout the zoo. On your left, that's our ocelot exhibit. That's new glass, new framing, so it's very safe for the public and for our animals. Something that we have done on our own, not through our ARPA funding, we redid our education station. So we utilize this for events, banquets, birthday parties, you name it, we use this building. So we repainted it, we redid the ceiling, basically just gave it a fresh update and facelift. There is a fountain that was donated to the zoo by the Dunn family. It hadn't been working for a couple of years, so we got that up and running, got it repainted, basically just looking brand new. It's a good aesthetics right when you walk into the zoo. And then last picture that you can see is our new viewing house for the jaguar exhibit. 3-inch reinforced glass right there. We did move it a little to the right for a better viewing experience because that's where our jaguars tend to lay during the afternoon sun. Kids love to go up there and just like peek in through it. Gave it some new paint, same with the night house that you can see to the right. Of course, we had to keep it with our UHV colors with our partnership with them. And then, of course, our master plan process, as most are interested in. So this is being funded through our ARPA funds. Within the last month, our board of directors has secured the services of Felis Consulting to facilitate this process. They have over 2 decades of experiences and have led over 20 master plans for institutions around this, the nation. Their firm focuses on long-term strategy and planning for small-scale zoos and aquariums, which we thought was perfect for our zoo. One of the taglines that they use is small size, big dreams, big hearts, and big impact. We felt like that was just perfect for us. We may be small in size, but we can create a big impact to our community, and that's what we strive to do at the zoo. We will be going through 4 different steps in this master plan. The first one is our visioning. This is just defining the potential of what the zoo can become. This will include questionnaires and workshops with the board, with staff, with community stakeholders, just basically seeing what we can make this zoo become in the future. The next will be our creative development. This will actually be digging deep, seeing what we need to do, infrastructure, possible site evaluation, animal collection evaluation, things like that. It's just defining the whole brand experience, what the Texas Zoo is going to be known for. The next one is a business planning. This was not included initially in the master plan, but we as the board felt like it was necessary if we're going to be spending money, y'all's money, since it's being funded by the city, to create this master plan, we need to have a roadmap to make it happen. So this should help us focus on what we need, fundraising abilities, things like that, investing and whatnot. And then lastly, of course, our strategic development plan, which is basically the final report. It'll include the phasing of implementation, fundraising needs, site plans, considerations on revenue generation, mission, and construction logistics. We expect this to be done early of next summer, hopefully, fingers crossed. And I also want to point out that prior to final approval, we will be holding 2 community meetings for local audience and stakeholder involvement. Something that we have been striving to increase with the Texas Zoo is community collaboration. So recently, especially with the leadership of our executive director, we have been partnering with other nonprofits, basically to help us get some more admissions throughout the door, but to help them further their missions as well. So back in September, we did a drive with the food bank, which is Roar Against Hunger. That was a big success. People could just bring cans, we collect them for the food bank, and then they got 50% off admission. So it was a win-win for everyone. This past Saturday, we did a partnership with the Salvation Army, Paws for the Cause. They could bring blankets, sweaters, jackets, anything that was on the list for Salvation Army. We would give it to them. They had their bus out there, and then they would get admission into the zoo. And then an upcoming one would be our Toys for Tots event. That's going to be December 9th through the 10th. It's just, we're going to be a location that you can drop off a toy for the Toys of Tots drive, and then you would get half off admission for the zoo. So those are just examples of how we strive to add community collaboration. We're hoping to do one every month throughout the year. So for those listening, for nonprofits, if you would like to partner with the zoo, please give us a call. We would love to do that. And then lastly, we just wanted to take a moment to highlight our city and zoo partnership. Y'all do a lot for us, and probably a few things that y'all may not be aware of. One of them would be tree removal and debris cleanup. So as you can see, we had a few trees that got damaged in recent storms. Excuse me. And so we came, thank you, cold front. So we came in the morning, we had a couple of trees down, we were like, oh my gosh, our staff can't handle this, what do we do? We called Christy, who is also our vice president. She got us in touch with the Parks Department. They were here within an hour, got the tree removed. It was fabulous. Same with our debris cleanup. We had a lot of debris in our back lot, so the staff and volunteers had a cleanup day. We piled it all up, and the city was helpful enough to come and pick it up for us. Something else that y'all have helped us with, there is a stormwater valve right outside of the zoo that gets backed up quite a bit, actually, from the Guadalupe River and has been needed in repair. We got with Jesus, and thankfully that has been taken care of and repairs have been made to it. So hopefully, knock on wood, within these next couple of years while it floods, it will not affect the zoo at all. And then lastly, board representation. Through our lease, we actually have 2 city-appointed representatives. Currently, we have 1 vacancy, which was the Parks Director, so we're waiting on that to be filled. But Elizabeth Tice from CBB, she is one of y'all's appointees. But then we also have 2 other city employees on the board just for funds. So with that, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for everything that y'all do for the zoo. We really appreciate all the support that you give us, and if you have any questions.
I'll just briefly thank, of course, Allison, Lacey, and Christy Euchre, who are the other 2 board members that happen to be city employees that serve on the board. And so when it's all said and done, you know, we have a pretty good representation of city folks on the board, which is really a good thing, because it's similar to with the housing authority. You know, the zoo can't be successful without a great partnership, you know, with the city, you know, and vice versa. Goes without saying that the zoo is a great asset of ours in our community and in South Texas, and so it's important for us to invest in it, to be committed to it, and we hope that this master planning process serves as a springboard to remind everybody of the importance of the zoo, but more importantly on the needs of the zoo, and hopefully bring all the right players to the table to be able to help implement the vision for the zoo, which at the end of the day, I think, you know, benefits everybody in our community. So, and shout out back to you as well for your leadership on the board. There's been, you know, the zoo went through a lot because of Hurricane Harvey, as everybody in our community. And so it's, like with every organization that was impacted, it took several years for the organization to rebound and get, you know, out of that. And, you know, there's been a resurgence of, you know, new board members and new interest, you know, in ensuring that the zoo reaches its full potential. And so thank you for your leadership, you know, in that as well. And I hope that you, council, and the public that might be listening, really take advantage of the opportunities to be part of the master planning process.
And I will add to that, Mayor and Council, that if you haven't yet received an email from one of the board members, you will shortly. We are sending out surveys to our stakeholders to gather information for the master planning process. And so we encourage everyone to take a few minutes and look over that and give us some feedback so we know what everybody is expecting and wanting and hoping for our zoo.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Hammond. That's one of the best zoo updates I think I've ever sat through. So appreciate that.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Any case, last but not least, we have a third city manager's report. This was somewhat of a last-minute addition, but we felt it was important to update you on the latest related to the development of the UDO. I won't steal Julie's thunder, but I hope this conversation proves to be fruitful since we are on a timeline to try and adopt it. Julie?
And I'll try and be as brief as possible. I know that I'm the last person between many of y'all and Thanksgiving break. But
Technically, that's me in executive session, so
great then. I'll take all the time.
Let me feel that pressure.
I do want to say, though, that there are some issues that are controversial, and I know it's Thanksgiving and everything else, but these are important issues, and we as council need to give this the time that's necessary. So as Julie makes her presentation, if we've got questions, we do need to consider these items and her suggestions.
So before I really get into the slideshow, I just want to say I have been busy. I have been meeting with a lot of folks. It started, I've given the same presentation over and over to different groups. It started with our last steering committee meeting, went to developers and local engineers and design professionals group on November 7th, then Planning Commission on the 16th, and just yesterday I met with the Home Builders Association. Gave them the exact same presentation, which snippets of it are, I've condensed it to the hot button issues that were discussed at those meetings. And I laid everything out there. We don't want any surprises. We're not trying to hide anything. We are getting everything, all the changes that we felt were significant changes and letting people know about them. I did also preface all of my presentations with these are things that I've identified from my perspective as things that I think developers or citizens, are big deviations from what we currently do, but I encouraged everybody to read the entire thing because that is my perspective, although I think it is an educated perspective. So this is kind of how the format of the presentation. I went article by article and highlighted what the changes were. So this slide just highlights how I organized the entire presentation and explained in detail the different sections that were changing. So as Jan said, there are a few hot button issues. There are 4 items that I will discuss tonight. 2 that I'd really like some direction on. 2 I think we've sort of worked them out. I think that they're good as they are as we tweak them. So the first item was requiring contractors to carry liability insurance. So all of the trades, the state licensed trades currently are required to carry liability insurance, but general contractors, there's no state general contractor license. When the state eliminated the general contractor's license about 20 years ago, it was the very beginning of my career, a lot of cities responded by requiring those contractors to carry general liability insurance. And we were not one of them, but there's a lot of cities around here, just up the road, Cuero, that have required it for a very long time. So at first there was a lot of concern about this. Rick Madrid did an amazing job and reached out to a local insurance agent, Donna Easley, and got some quotes on what that really would look like for a lot of different types of contractors, and then shared that with the Builders Association. So at this point, I think the Builders Association is not objecting this. We also had a lot of support on your larger contractors that are already carrying this general liability insurance. There was a lot of comments that said, everybody should already be doing this. And I think also clarifying what it was, because we wrote the ordinance to say that it's the least amount of a state license holder. And when we just referenced all those state codes, so that if the state code changes, we don't have to change our ordinance. So I went and pulled all that. And what it really is provide coverage of not less than $300,000 for all claims in a 1 year period. So I think even though this was kind of raised to be an issue, I think we've done a lot of education, and I think it's fine as is. This second issue was for this list of commercial uses, which if you read through them, they're more of your heavier commercial uses, things that aren't necessarily so compatible to be next door to a residence. We have different distance separations. Some of them are as small as 100 feet distance. Others are 2 or 3 are up to 500 feet distance. And this really came out, if you remember in the very beginning of the process, we did a lot of public input and got the diagnostic report. And in that diagnostic report, they said you need to provide some separation because you have a lot of conflict sometimes between residences and these heavier commercial. So there was this concern brought up that that's going to really impact the location, our development of some of these businesses. And so I also, while I think it's a great idea from a land use planner, on the administration side of it, I was a little nervous as well. So we went back to the office and did the brainstorming, and we have a current waiver process for screening fences. When a commercial business is adjoining a residence, they have to provide a required screening fence. But that residence can say, no, I don't care about that screening fence, and do waivers. So we're trying to draft language to basically create similar waivers. So if a business wants to locate one of these heavy commercial businesses wants to locate next to a residence and doesn't meet the separation requirements, then that residence could sign a waiver and say, no, it's good with me, and then that would also stay in perpetuity. So that, because obviously if a business locates there, it's there, the house sells to a new resident, they're buying into that situation. They know about it. So we're working on waiver language that's similar to that screening fence, and I think that kind of eases my concerns too on the administration side, but some of the other concerns that were brought up of limiting properties.
Julie, this would be for one of these businesses wanting to locate near a residence. This wouldn't impact anybody that's there right now.
Correct.
And would the waiver process only be for immediate adjacent properties? Or is there
within the distance, and it would depend on, the uses have different distance, the more obnoxious, or I want to say obnoxious, but the more intense of use, they have the greater separation, and so it would be within that range.
Okay, good.
This is one of the items that I would like direction from council on tonight. I've got some options laid out. So basically, we've heard during the Active Transportation Master Plan and a lot of our plans, people like sidewalks. They like sidewalks in their neighborhoods. And over time, especially, there's really two types of neighborhoods that get developed. They're neighborhoods that are developed by builder-developers, which you don't have this problem because that builder doesn't sell the lot until they've built the house because they're a builder-developer, and that's really why they develop, to build houses. And then you have the more traditional style developer that will, their job is they're developing the lots, and then once they've developed the lots, they'll sell it to whoever wants to buy the lot. Those types of neighborhoods are the ones where you end up 20, 30 years down the road, and you may have gaps in the sidewalk. So the proposal was to install the sidewalks at the time of the final plat. There's a lot of concerns about construction. There's other cities out there that do it. This is actually a photo of Austin's Colony neighborhood in Bryan. You can see that there are sidewalks with no houses. Because that's the model that they use. So there's definitely ways for that to work. However, our developers were very clear and provided some numbers just yesterday that the additional upfront cost is going to be very difficult for our market, at least our market as it is today. So that's why I want to talk about options to council, because we've heard from our citizens that they want sidewalks. We've heard from the developers that upfront carrying cost is just not really feasible for the Victoria market. So what does council want to do? One option would be just to make no changes and continue our current ordinance and our current practice. Option two is we can make no changes to the ordinance, and we actually already have a solution in our existing ordinance in Chapter 20, which I have on a subsequent slide that I'll show for y'all. Option number three would be the city takes that on to fill the gaps, and we do periodic CIP projects to complete sidewalk gaps throughout existing neighborhoods. A lot of times these neighborhoods will only have 2 or 3 or 4 lots that have gaps, and they're completely built out. It's really what we're focusing on, not neighborhoods that have 0 sidewalks. That would be a bigger CIP project. And then option number 4, and this one still needs vetting. And had a lot of time to put all this together and kind of thoroughly research everything. But if it is something that y'all think it might be a good idea, we'll definitely continue to go down that avenue and research. But option 04 would be to require a bond for 10% of the sidewalks on the final plat. And then sidewalks not installed after 5 years or 90% of the lots that developed would then be installed. Hopefully it's less than 10% because we're only capturing funding for 10%. And then the city would install those after that time with that bond if the developer doesn't install them. So go to Chapter 20, Article 5, sidewalk construction. So this is currently in the ordinance. I do think that there's some tweaks necessary if we wanted to start instituting this. Mainly the time and the notice requirements are very, very short, and I think we wouldn't want to give people a lot more notice and time than what is currently outlined. But this is basically what a lot of people call paving liens, where you provide notice to that owner to install the sidewalk. If they don't do it within a certain amount of time, the city doesn't, then sends them a bill. If they don't pay the bill, then the lien would be placed on the property. So I'll pause for a second to let y'all read that, and then I can go back to the options. And this is not the entire article. I think I really just copied the sections that I felt was really pertinent to the mechanics of it.
The city would build the sidewalk and there'd be a lien against the property, or the homeowner would ultimately, the lot owner would ultimately be responsible.
Yeah, the property owner is ultimately responsible, but the process goes is first you would ask them to build it, the property owner. If they don't build it, then the city builds it, and then they bill them. If they don't pay the bill, then the lien gets placed.
So I'm trying to put this Article 5 into some type of scenario for a developer coming in and, you know, as we do it now, where they build the sidewalk when they do the house.
Right, so that would stay. So our current scheme would stay as is, and this really would be shifting the issue from development to existing property owners and remedying. Basically, we would continue our current practice, which then means over time you have some neighborhoods that end up with 1 or 2 or 3 lot gaps in them. There's a very prominent gap on Masters. Creekside has a 30-year-long gap. You know, you just have the 1 or 2 lots in different built-out neighborhoods. And so it would not be a development issue anymore. We would utilize what we already have in code and notify those property owners to fill in those gaps. So
We just have never exercised it.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've never seen this exercise.
It was in this, I think it was done with curb and gutter and paving in the 60s or
Yeah.
70s. It
The
has
curb and
not.
gutter, I do remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was billed to the owners and we
Yes.
paid it. But, you know, I would think that would be necessary in order to be able to, you know, cover, because there were open ditches. And so we had to come in and Dad and Mom had to pay for curb and gutter. And
And use
that
it for
was something that
sidewalks
was
as well.
necessary for the street to be made. The sidewalk, I don't know, there's some places that you don't need a sidewalk.
But you don't have to exercise this either, right? I
No.
mean,
And so-
obviously, we haven't.
Right, and so really, I think the sidewalk gaps, we're not looking to put sidewalks in all neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. We have a sidewalk gap GIS layer that tells us exactly where you have a really good sidewalk network in a neighborhood. 95% or 99% of the neighborhood is built out, and you just have 1 or 2 or 3 homes in that neighborhood that over 30 years, a house has never been built on. So there's a gap. And so, you know, we would be shifting it from trying to fix it on the front end, which was what the proposal was, to just addressing the gaps that we have. So my recommendation would be option 2 or 3. Either the city take on a CIP project to fill in those small gaps, or push it on as use Chapter 20 that we already have, and then continue the sidewalk scheme in our development code as we currently have it.
I have a question. What about the sidewalks that aren't in good shape? I mean, you could trip and fall. There's a lot of those because they're old. What are you going to do about those? You going to require them to replace them?
I think generally now, Public Works will sometimes, if it's bad enough trip hazard, they do have a small budget where they do sometimes go and repair sidewalks. And then sometimes now too, if the site is being redeveloped, something completely torn down and being rebuilt, and the sidewalk is, doesn't meet, when it's broken and cracked, then they're required to replace it
Right.
at that time.
And I think sidewalks is a real tricky thing to understand, right? Because oftentimes people associate sidewalks with being associated with a road, which they are sometimes, but in neighborhoods, more than, the majority of the time, those sidewalks are the responsibility of the homeowner. And so to your question about, where they may need repairs, you could theoretically use the same verbiage to fix it yourself and then bill the property owner. So you could use the same approach to fixing areas that need to be fixed, right?
Yes, and if.
Which I imagine was the intent of its
I understand, but, okay, let's say you have two neighbors. One has the sidewalks all broken up, and then you have one that you're gonna go put a new sidewalk on, like you say in Article 2. So how are you gonna appease both of them, or the one that's got the broken sidewalk, he can come and say, okay, the city put a sidewalk for my neighbor, and I've got a broken one, and they're not helping me. I understand that, the owner is responsible, but you're doing for one what you're not doing for the other.
But if you did it in number 2, you would be charging the owner.
Right.
If you did number 3, it would be in our CIP and we would be paying it, but number 2, we would charge the owner.
Okay, but if
And
you
we
do.
could address, when we go out and look in the planning phase, if there are broken, we can do the notification and try and get some of those repairs. I mean, it just kind of depends on how far we want to go. A lot of our sidewalks are in great condition, and then there's some that aren't.
Julie, I know a part of this has also been the specs changing. When you say make no changes to the ordinance, would that be impacted?
No, if we didn't make a change to the ordinance.
If we don't make a change, then the requirement of them being thicker, that is within the proposed ordinance. So if we didn't change it.
Yeah, well, that wasn't,
that wouldn't matter.
that would have been, that was discussed as a potential solution to damaged sidewalks. So
Right.
it's not actually anywhere in the ordinance. It would, because this engineering manuals don't have to go to council, they're not in an ordinance. So, but we wouldn't touch those.
Okay, because I know that had come up also.
Right, I heard that the thickness had been changed, and, on certain parts, I guess on the driveway part, I understand, because you're gonna have weight on them. But on the regular sidewalks, it's still your 4 feet, 4-inch sidewalks.
Well, if we don't, if we can go with option 2 or 3, we wouldn't make those changes. That was really in response to the complaints that they would get broken up, and we did a lot more research. And if we wanted to keep the proposed ordinance, we would go look at what some of those other cities' design specifications are. So that hasn't really been, it was just an idea thrown out there. It's not fully, it's not anywhere in the proposed ordinance, and it would have been in a change in the engineering standards.
So the picture that you showed us a while ago on that,
And
those
Brian?
cul-de-sacs that have the sidewalks already, it's not gonna be a change that you're proposing?
Well, that's what I'm hoping to get direction from council tonight.
That picture is what the ordinance as written proposes.
Right.
So
So
what do you
another way to
Which
think of
is a
it,
change.
yeah, another way to think of it is simply just, with what's being proposed to be different is you're ensuring that a sidewalk is put in at the beginning of the development to avoid these gaps that we know exist from neighborhoods that were built out 20, 30 years ago, right? But the developers have to pay for that up front, which is cost prohibitive. So we can do that, or the other approach is to exercise the option that we, send a notice to an owner that they got to do it. If they don't, we do it, and then we bill them in order to fill the gap. So we're being reactive, right, versus the proactive piece. And either could work, pros and cons to either approach, but that's really the direction ultimately that we need from council is, do we continue down the path of trying to be proactive and requiring the sidewalks to be put in at the beginning? Or do we simply just try and go more full force with a reactive approach to try and fill the gaps?
And are the concerns that have been voiced by the developers, are they primarily cost-related, or are there other concerns also?
Well, they believe that the sidewalks would have to be torn out and rebuilt at in the area of the driveway, and that they would not hold up to the construction of the homes. But that's where we started to do a lot more research on how the cities that have that rule address that. But if the cost is too prohibitive, we didn't continue to go research that, because if they can't afford to carry that carrying cost, then that's really a moot point if we're not going to change the ordinance.
And we have in our city, if a developer comes in to do a neighborhood, it's, you can look at my neighborhood, like you said, benchmark, there's still lots available. They just don't build out quickly like you would see in some other major metropolitan markets where you could probably do sidewalks at the time. But, and your carrying cost is a lot shorter because that's going to turn. But also, think about it, if you have it sitting there and then you want to go construct a house, right, you're going to have to put a driveway in somewhere. So you're taking out just a wasted cost somewhere. And if you've ever been on a residential construction site, there's a lot of deliveries of big trucks and this and that, and you're gonna drive probably right over that sidewalk and crack it up and have to rip it out. So what are we actually accomplishing? And I know that everybody would like to have it, but then your home buyer has to pay for a sidewalk twice on already, as Mr. Etienne had pointed out to us, unaffordable housing that's already out there. There's just not affordable housing really anymore. So you're putting an extra burden on the person purchasing the home, as well as the developer, that right now in the market we're in for Victoria is just not really a good idea.
I'm inclined to like option number 2, because I'm discussing or talking through my head on option 4. And while that shares the cost partially with the city, partially with ultimately the property owner, that's only prospectively, that's only moving forward. And a lot of the issues that we have with gaps in sidewalks, which are now more of an issue because people want to get out and walk and have some exercise, we could fix those problems as well as problems in new development if we make no changes and simply use Chapter 20 a little more aggressively when necessary.
And what's the reason that we haven't utilized Chapter 20? I mean, to date.
I'm not sure when it fell off from being utilized. I don't think, Kenneth said he's never used it in your tenure, correct? So it's
policy, just a policy issue, not to enforce it.
And that's kind of the question too, if y'all are okay with us changing our policy and starting to actually utilize Chapter 20. And I do think that there are some changes that we need to make. I think the notification and the timeline is way too short in that ordinance. So
And what's the sidewalk standard, to what Mrs. Solis had said?
it would be the 4 foot wide, 4-inch, whatever's on the books now.
But it is now.
And is there anything in Chapter 20 that's a triggering circumstance, like a bright line that if certain things in the neighborhood reach this point, then that's when Chapter 20 applies?
No, it could apply at any time, but that's where I think, staff would, it has to be initiated by council, and that's where, so we'd be bringing these to you periodically, once or twice a year, and maybe it would take a couple of years to get through, but then you'd probably fall off and not do it for a long time once we get some gaps filled. And so, no, but we do have a lot of data out there that tells us where just one lot may make the connectivity of an entire neighborhood complete.
Is there an appeal process if someone receives this, where they appeal to council?
No, but we can write that into, of course, it is council initiated too, so you would know up front.
I mean, I guess my concern on Chapter 20, I mean, obviously it exists, it's just not being utilized, but if we did go that route, I'd want to make sure that it was utilized and applied in a equitable manner, so that, we're treating like neighborhoods similarly, we're treating like properties within neighborhoods similarly.
Yeah, it says that it's required by city council, so my interpretation of this is that council has to initiate Chapter 20. But we can definitely bring.
That's why it's not initiated.
Yeah. But we also have never brought it to you to be initiated, so.
But you wouldn't be bringing it, if it's initiated by city council, it's not you bringing it to us to initiate.
are
That's my
asking
point.
if you want
But
to
what we can
initiate
do
it.
though is we can be better at educating you on the opportunities that exist so that you can decide whether you want to initiate or not.
The
As
ask.
opposed to not providing you with the information to know that it's an option for you.
And you did have in there that, I mean, we could do it as part of the CIP, just utilizing this repayment plan as well.
We used, for a while, we would use CDBG funds to fill in gaps in CDBG eligible areas, but there's so many of these neighborhoods that aren't in CDBG eligible areas. So we actually, in some ways, have some better connectivity in those CDBG eligible areas than we do in the ones that aren't.
Well, and one thing too to keep in mind is we don't necessarily have to, we can always make the changes to chapter 20 after
Yes.
the UDO gets adopted. I think for now, the more pressing direction is whether, we keep the proposal within what is recommended for the UDO change, or we pull it out. And then we can take our time, potentially after the UDO goes into effect, coming back and figuring out the specifics of how we change chapter 20 that meets your expectation, and staff can better provide you with the information at that time too.
And also giving y'all some examples of what those gaps, having the GIS layer map and shown so you can see what those gaps are. Yeah, and that's what we're looking for tonight. I mean, yes, the chapter 20, if we choose to go that route, it would not be in tandem with the UDO because that's a lot of work on us right now during the holidays.
I'm okay with making sure that we're not sticking that sidewalk part in there, and let's work on 20, and it's gonna be discretion of council to use it or not.
I would have to agree.
I think that's the best option.
I mean, that's already where we are right now, really.
Okay,
It's-
so we'll revert the draft back to what we have now, and then in the spring, maybe that can be something at the March quarterly workshop or some other future date. We'll bring you information on chapter 20 changes.
We'll discuss with the next mayor and then, and then
Yeah.
go from there.
Okay, the second big point of contention is parkland dedication. I think in hindsight, we should have really discussed and established what a parkland dedication fee in lieu of would be, because I do think a fee would be less than the direction that we came up with at the last September quarterly workshop. So this is what was, is it proposed in the ordinance and was presented as the development of public parkland is required at the rate of 1/2 acres of parkland per 100 dwelling units. And this is for single-family residential units plus units in multifamily residential and manufactured home parks and whatnot. And then there's additional standards and stuff, but I think the dedication amount is really the sticking point. So I'm going to outline these options, then I'm going to give you more information, and then I'll pull options up again. But we could eliminate the parkland requirement, which does go against the comprehensive and parks master plans. We could reduce the dedication requirements. We could adopt fees in lieu of dedication at a lower cost than dedication, because land has a cost to it. Eliminate dedication requirements, but require development fees to further develop our community and regional parks. And then there's also been a concern about affordable housing. One option would be to eliminate the fee requirement or the dedication requirement in CDBG eligible census tracts. Although I will point out that's not quite an affordable housing policy, it's more of an infill policy. But what we're seeing as far as affordable housing, small new lots, they are more in the CDBG eligible census tracts. It's also very important to remember that parkland, any fees collected in parkland dedication or development must be expended within 8 years. So the state law is pretty vague actually on parkland requirements, but there's a lot of case law on parkland requirements. And so that fees being expended within 8 years really would protect the city from challenge. So here's some additional information I think that's important for y'all to have when we're discussing this. So from the Parks Master Plan, we do have a level of service chart. As you can see, from a regional park and a community park standpoint, we have a surplus, so we're doing very well. But from a neighborhood park standpoint, we have a deficit. And a lot of that, as you see at the history of how Victoria has grown, a lot of development really up to the 1950s. The developers was kind of a given in community development, our development trends, our market. You would see developers create parks. And after probably the 50s, 60s, you saw less of that, and so you see a lot of our neighborhoods on the north end that don't have neighborhood parks. But there is sort of a trend back to that, and so there are some private HOA maintained parks on in the newest subdivisions because the market is back to wanting that. So this is also out of our park master plan, and as I said, this map does not account for private or HOA parks, which we do have a couple, but you can see the blue-gray blobs are areas of our town that have park service gaps. And the plan really illustrates a gap if park should be within a half or a quarter mile walk shed. This is from the Park Master Plan, our park accessibility. So 12% of residential areas are within a quarter mile, and then 19% are within half a mile. So since you have to spend parkland fees within 8 years, I wanted to give council a snapshot of what our last 8 years in single-family residential lot development looks like. Now, this is only for platted lots. We didn't have time to fully go through all of the multifamily, the site plan type of units. So this is just lots, but we did find some, and I can't promise that this is an exhaustive number, but we did have, Enchanted Gardens. Mornington was expanded into Blue Ranch, and so there was a lot more lots there. We also just received a manufactured home park subdivision today or yesterday for another 219 lots. So out of those additional units, which multifamily, when I did work for a city that required parkland dedication, I never saw a multifamily developer actually dedicate land because usually they're choosing a site that just really couldn't accommodate dedication. So they're usually, they always would pay the fee. And especially if your fee is less than your dedication requirement, you just see a lot of that. So out of, in addition to these 1,100 lots, we would have 582 units that would also have been hit with the parkland dedication requirement. But we just pulled those at the last minute. And I want to thank Celeste Machaca on doing all of this research and going through all of our old plats to get these numbers for you. But if we were to apply a dedication or development fee, these are some of the numbers, what some of the numbers would look like. So if you were to add another 582 lots, you're adding about half that. So another $130,000 to the $250 dedication fee, about half that number, and then add to it to capture the additional 582 lots. The 879 and the 737, there is, again, case law on how much a city can charge without opening themselves up to challenge. So Freese and Nichols provided us with a calculator, and the $879 for dedication and the $737.62 for developments really would be the max that we would want to charge for each of those to make sure that we are not opening ourselves up to challenge. So if you look at 1,100 lots, or the dedication rate of 1.5 acres per 100 lots. That's about 65,000 square feet, we are reducing our lot size, minimum lot size, to 5,000 square feet per lot. So on 100 lots, you're looking at dedicating about 13 to parkland. At $50,000 or $60,000 a lot, you're looking at $750,000 under the dedication scheme. So adopting the fee would be greatly below what currently is the dedication rate. I know that's a lot of numbers.
On the
Set a
others.
rate when we did the parkland dedication?
Yes, and during the workshop.
$150 or something like that?
We didn't talk about an actual fee. We just talked about the number of, how much acreage, if my memory serves me correctly. That we never got to actually discussing what a fee
Talking
would
about
look
the
like.
acre and a half?
And one of the things that was suggested, we were shown pictures at the meeting yesterday of a neighborhood park that was 6,500 square feet, which is a tenth of the size of what we're requiring. And, it depends on the size of the neighborhood, obviously, but Julie just showed us a picture that showed how lacking we are in parkland and neighborhood parks. And, what was suggested was to do 6,500 square foot. I may be wrong, there may have been several of them in that park, and so I take that back, but anyway, it was a much smaller park.
You could do
than-
a lot smaller dedication rate, and the reason the dedication rate was higher was to really push developers to pay the fee so that there wouldn't be a lot of 6,500 square foot parks scattered throughout town that then the Parks Department has to maintain. It was part of that discussion.
Right. And you may recall that when discussing these options at the workshop in September, we walked away with the understanding that, council preferred the fee mechanism to try and encourage people, I should say, to prefer the fee so that we can use the money to reinvest in, let's say, Ethel Lee Tracy Park or any other park that might be close to that development, as opposed to adding all these pocket parks, right, as Julie suggests.
And keep in mind, the parkland fee, so you have a dedication fee and a development fee. And of course, dedication can only be used to buy parkland. Development could be used at your regional neighborhood, any type of park. But there's also zones. So it really, we'll have to develop a zone map system, usually following council member districts is the easiest, or even if we could, I don't know, we'll have to get with the attorneys on if we could just do the super districts and divide the city into 2 zones. But those fees captured in that service area have to be spent in that service area.
So the concern was not so much from the developers I'm speaking, not so much that we were requiring parkland dedication, it was the amount
Costs.
And the amount translates to the cost.
to the cost, okay. And was there discussion in those meetings about the fee in lieu and what that looked like in terms of, a recommendation on, look, if you set the fee here, we're okay with it. If it's above this, then we have a problem. I'm trying to get a sense of the feedback that you've gotten. that
Yeah,
I'm-
no, I
I'm
mean, there
missing.
was a discussion of the fee, although then there's some comments about, well, that's just double taxation as the fee. But as far as the amount, I did not give anybody a number because we never discussed what that number would look like. The maximum is that 1,600. So yes, that would be part 2 is once I have direction from council, we start publicizing what that number would be. And
So
then getting feedback.
this fee that you're talking about, what can it be used for? Maintenance of parks, existing parks? Or does it have to be on new parks?
So the dedication has to be buying land.
So the fee
you
in
can
lieu
add-
of,
you
you
can
have to
add-
buy, so then how do we, as we already know, a residential district or housing neighborhood, if you collected all the property tax for it, will never pay for the street rebuild or the utility upgrade, utility rebuild. if you collected it the entire time and just kept it for that over the life of a 30-year road, whatever. So how are we going to then keep adding parks with this new residential develop that we're requiring them to create a park that the city's going to take over and increase the city's park budget, but yet still the housing that's created by it doesn't pay for roads and utilities?
I think the intent isn't to have a fee that'll help pay for itself. Obviously, yes, there are things in parallel that we would have to talk about in terms of maintenance expenses for parks, staffing for parks. That's all part of the growth, right? And I get your point, around the fact that, property taxes alone don't pay for some of the essential services, right? We've obviously talked plenty about that. But I shouldn't say none. This service isn't something that we typically try and obviously recoup, 100% of the funds, right? The idea is simply that under this fee mechanism, we would have greater control over maximizing the efficiency in which we expand the parks, because rather than having a bunch of pocket parks, we can just focus on, let's say, expanding Ethel Lee Tracy Park. And if you're ever gonna have crews there mowing that park, well, then you just mow another acre or another 2 acres, and it's much easier than having to mobilize to move somewhere else.
But why wouldn't we have a market-driven HOA neighborhood park that they control in that neighborhood and they're responsible for? That seems to be a better answer than creating a park that's a neighborhood-type park, potentially. I know they're talking about fee, but a neighborhood park that the entire city takes care of and services just that neighborhood. If the market is really driving the need for parkland associated with a neighborhood going in, why wouldn't we let the market drive it?
I think only one other consideration, though, is that that would be a private park, and the neighborhood could decide they didn't want to have that park anymore, didn't want to maintain it. And, if we're trying to create parks for everyone.
But it's a neighborhood park, you wouldn't that would
Well,
be
and I
my
think-
fears.
Would we
and I
have a
think-
code that
want a public-
requires that neighborhood park, or are we just saying let the market handle
Right.
all parks?
And I think,
Well, it can't handle all parks. You can't have market
Well,
handle Ethel
Right.
Lee Tracy,
Future
right?
neighborhood.
but I think it all boils down to what value are we placing in having parks, right? Because we obviously find value in things like public safety, right? So we don't worry about the market driving the quality of public safety in one neighborhood versus another, because we choose and decide that public safety is important. And even though property taxes alone don't pay 100% of that expense, it's so important to us that, we don't care about it, and we ensure that it's as equitable as possible throughout the city, right? So the question is, to what extent is parks important, right? Because if parks and the availability of that is important, then we can proceed in trying to, okay, well, how do we get there, right? If it's not as important, which is okay, well, then we simply just don't make it as high of a priority to try and figure out these creative ways that we can try and achieve to grow the parks, if that makes any sense.
Sure. So the
And
question
have
is,
park
I mean,
availability, right?
you have to balance development, attracting businesses or attracting developers, not making it so expensive that they won't develop here with, do we want the parks coming? To me, it seems if I saw on your graph, we had a boom in development there for a couple of years, and now we're way down. I'm not sure I'm real interested in making additional barriers to entry at this point, given the fact that in this year, which we're almost to the end of, we've had 15 residential lots created. I think we can balance interests. That doesn't mean they're not important. It just means, hey, one has a greater priority right now than maybe another one does down
And
the
that could
road.
be an option in keeping the ordinance as we've written it, but then adopt that fee to be really nominal. I mean, that fee could be $25 per lot, and to get us through the economic downturn that we're seeing. And then as things get better, then a future council can say, no, we really want to adjust that fee to something that is more meaningful so that we can do something, although there is that 8-year right to refund. That's
and-
another option.
And I tend to agree with the mayor from the standpoint that, if residential parkland or lots within neighborhoods are really important to people, they're gonna buy houses in those types of neighborhoods. And if I'm a developer, that's the kind of neighborhood I'm gonna build. So I'm I would be concerned about keeping in some higher barriers to entry than we've had in the current UDO and look at, I'd rather look at some alternatives and see if we can generate some more development here.
I have a question. I know that Jesus keeps bringing up the Ethel Lee Tracy Park, but you've got people that cannot go to that park. So to me, the neighborhood parks, although they may be small and they may be scattered, and you showed on your map that you have a lot of desert land out there that need parks. Not everybody can get out to Ethel Lee.
Well, and to be clear, the reason why I use that as an example is because per your own direction, this would only apply also to larger neighborhood residential, not infill projects, right? And so when we think of where in town would that is more likely to happen is, well, there's available property on the north side. And that's why I use Ethel Lee Tracy as an example. And y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of that direction in September was for it to not apply for infill, individual lots.
Okay, so you're talking.
And so, because we could be very easily challenged if, let's say, we took this money from a neighborhood that pops up off of Placido Benavides and used that money at Hopkins Park, right? We would have to really be very clear in connecting the dots between the money that we collect, by that new neighborhood off of Placido Benavides and how those people living in that neighborhood will benefit from it. And that's why I use Ethel Lee Tracy as an example, because we wouldn't be able to just take that money and, use it elsewhere.
I understand, but I'm saying, we have a lot of, empty spaces that I think could benefit more than, just concentrating on one big, because park. Because sometimes, they say, okay, well, we got Riverside. Riverside is huge, it can compensate for the area that doesn't have any parks. But, you have some places that really need a park.
Well, and that was part of the discussion at the September meetings, that we don't want tiny parks like 6,500, but we don't also need more riversides. And so that sweet spot that was discussed was 3.5 acres, which is a larger neighborhood park that really could serve a couple of neighborhoods. And so, yeah, if you collect that fee, you'd be looking for land that would accommodate several neighborhoods in an area that's being built out.
So this service area gaps map, to me, it's only telling a partial story. There's a whole lot of parks that aren't shown on there, and they're also public. It's called the public school system, right? None of those are shown on there, so I can't really identify where those gaps are. It is still a taxable park right there. There's playground equipment. You can go on it. There's a track.
Can you, though?
Yeah. Yes. It's public land, so I don't believe that this service area gap map really shows that.
Well, I know Terra Vista has a park and Woodway has a park. So I know that it was really only looking at City of Victoria public parks.
It's just looking at City of Victoria, but I would say that there's playgrounds throughout the city that aren't identified on this map. There's usually a field that you can play in. There's a track you can go run or walk. There's a whole bunch of other amenities that aren't shown on here and doesn't tell the full story.
That aspect is true 100%. And the reason why I doubted whether we could with the school district or not is because, in my experience, there's typically formal agreements between the municipality and the school district for these parks, for their playgrounds, to be accessible to the general public, as a way for us to ensure that that's the case, because they could at any moment decide to just close them off and not make them accessible to the public.
And some of them
And
are.
so, yeah, and so if we are wanting to ensure that parks at schools are open to the public, we can certainly explore formalizing that access so that it can show up on a map like this as sort of a first step. And it also doesn't show, obviously, the private, I shouldn't say private, but the neighborhood.
HOA.
Yeah, the HOA, the neighborhood type of amenities either.
Right.
And the other part to parkland dedication is parkland development. So I live across the street from an HOA-owned park, and when I moved in, there was no playscape. It was just gorgeous 30-year-old oak trees, and it was never used. A playscape was constructed 2 years after I moved in, and there's almost not a day goes by that's nice weather that it's not used. So it's not just about having a park, it's also about having amenities in parks. And so that's why there's the 2 fees. So you could step in with a development fee to focus development on playgrounds in Riverside or Ethel Tracy or MLK or, the existing parks that we have to accommodate, the theoretic new residences that these houses are creating.
I wouldn't think that you would take a public fee to improve an HOA-owned.
No, to our parks, our Ethel Tracy, Riverside.
Oh, okay.
I think this whole topic got many facets to it. It's brand new for us. It's not new for a lot of other cities, but it is brand new for us. We're getting some pushback from developers, partially just because it's brand new and they haven't had a chance to totally absorb it. But even through this discussion, we're still grasping it too. I'd like to suggest that perhaps, I think that the work that's done on the UDO is important, and I like the timeline, but maybe we need to pull this part out and just make it be reserved or something, and either have another work session on it or have a subcommittee that we meet with some developers and see if we can flesh this out, because there's community parks, there's homeowner parks, is it a brand new subdivision that has one set of impacts? Is it some infill that has others? We could look at the school. I'd suggest that we maybe take that part out. I don't know what the procedure is, if that's even feasible.
Definitely. Well, and I can go back and talk to some of the developers that raised the concerns and ask if there's a fee at this point that would be able to be absorbed, because obviously some of those are already adding parks to their developments, and see what kind of response I get when it comes to what would you see, I'll just ask, what fee would you suggest, and see if that comes back as $0 or $200. So we can, it is. Well, let me keep going. Parkland for a second. There were other comments that we received. One was, can we flat out prohibit billboards? One real estate developer really brought up that the billboards can very greatly hinder future development of a commercial development of a site because of driveway location or removing the removal of those billboards and how those leases are written, and so they just can be a really big headache, and I have witnessed that many times over my career. Also, without a prohibition on billboards, we cannot gain the scenic city designation. Part of the requirement for that designation is to have a prohibition on billboards. And then lastly, which isn't a bullet point, but still a reason why we should maybe consider it, is because we regulate billboards every year with TxDOT, we have to, Rick has to do they call it a survey, but it's basically a big extensive report to TxDOT about billboards. If you have a prohibition on billboards, then you don't have to do that report anymore. But we've always been a friendly city when it comes to billboards, so if we're not ready to prohibit that, I understand as well. But that was actually brought up by someone that attended the meeting, not something that we proposed. And then another item that was brought up is to prohibit parking on grass throughout the city, requiring everyone to install a driveway over time. That's not really a UDO type rule. That would end up needing to be in Chapter 10, our nuisance ordinance, and there would, I think, really need to be a very big public education campaign and a lot of discussion on that. But I'd be happy to hear what council thoughts are.
That's not in there? I mean, I'm hoping that's not in there.
No.
No.
Okay.
These
I
are
don't think
things that,
There's too many one-car garage or carport, or there's.
these are items that were brought up by people that attended the meetings. But we didn't change anything, so unless.
Didn't we have an ordinance that prohibits billboards just in the historic district, right?
And then I think also in the Plácido Benavides Design District.
Okay.
And then also, if you put in an electronic billboard, you got to take down a number of statics, kind of modeled after the
Well,
railroad crossings.
it's not so much that you,
Square footage.
you have to, for an electronic, you have to take down others. It's the distancing requirement, and we are really running out of space
Yeah.
for new billboards.
Right. And that's why it was written that way, I think.
Right.
It was on
Which
planning
is,
that way.
which is part of the reason why it's like, well, is it time to just consider a prohibition since you really can't
You're very
put
limited
one
on
a
where
new,
you can
you
put
really
them now.
can't put a new one anywhere. Or at least very minimal.
But if we actually had it in writing, it would make an impact on other aspects, like getting a scenic city designation or these other things, even though you're saying if we at this point prohibited them, it wouldn't really have any effect because we're already there.
I mean, I haven't ran the, I haven't done every single piece of property and done the buffer on where the billboards are, but we're not seeing those applications. So I think when people are looking, where can I put a billboard, they're not finding spots. I do think that we have, there's probably very few, at least very few locations where people can, and the property owners are willing to.
Or you have the traffic count
Put
where it
one,
makes
or you have
sense.
exactly. So, and to prohibit billboards, that's just new billboards. The existing billboards, we'd be able to
Say,
and tell.
rebuild.
Right.
We could further expand on how long they could stay, or a lot of times there's a time frame in which you can rebuild, and then after the useful life, you can't rebuild.
Well, food for thought. We do plan on, continuing this conversation. I know you have it on the next slide.
Yes, so we do have the December 8th quarterly workshop that we could talk more about parkland dedication and billboards if you like. We could just put reserved for the parkland dedication and tackle that in the future, beginning of the year. I have read the proposed ordinance many times. My staff has read the proposed ordinance many times, but I promise you there will be an error in the new ordinance. It's just too big of a document to make sure that we caught everything. So there will be some amendments, so we can always tackle some of these things as we tackle some of the cleanup that we will inevitably find.
Next steps, I think we're going to end up not getting to the effective date, January 1st. I still think that we need to have a discussion around commercial items that may be in there, and from what I'm hearing.
Meaning the distance to residential?
No, just, there's some
Other
concerns from
things?
commercial people that we haven't discussed, and I think we're gonna need to discuss as a council. I don't have all of them with me, Ms. Scott, right now, no, and I haven't, this is just reading some tea leaves and hearing conversations. So I wanna make sure that we get everybody's concerns addressed. I don't wanna jump into this, and continually fix it. I wanna get it done and right the first time. But, I mean, I can see easily that second and third reading being independent at a minimum. But I want to make sure we get everything that we can addressed right now. And this was a great start. I do appreciate your presentation tonight. And Ms. Scott, we did spend an hour on it, so not 15 minutes, so. I will ensure that we get any commercial items brought to your attention.
Yes, because I have not heard. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's some in there that I was expecting a little bit more feedback on that I didn't get feedback, so.
And I've had just a couple of comments that I have not followed up with those individuals, or I've talked to them with the commitment to explore those more along the lines of what the mayor's referring to. And so certainly I will share those with you as I get that
Yeah.
additional feedback.
Because a lot of our commercials hasn't changed, so.
Right.
I want to publicly commend Julie. I've gone to a couple of the meetings, and she has done a fabulous job of presenting the information very openly and hearing a lot of comments, taking them in, very respectful. She's just done a great job. I've been very proud to be present and watch her work. So, but she will, I'm sure, welcome those comments from you or from whoever has them.
Just as a note, we started this in 2016?
No, it's been 2 years.
Well, but the UDO, yeah, I mean, but
Thank you.
but the
Every time
UDO
I
was
sat down-
recommended, it was
Before
part of the
The comp
2030 plan.
plan discussed
It
that
was
we.
before Mr. Garza was here.
Yes, so, well,
Before the word
Yes.
COVID existed.
So-
Yes.
so the,
Before Harvey, too.
The,
I might add.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I think it was
yeah,
2016.
the comp
when we
plan,
first
and
sat
then
down to
Thomas
try
and I
start.
did a presentation on the need. Why where we had some issues with the different enabling ordinances and structure.
Yes.
So, but as far as the
That was a
actual.
difficult presentation.
It really was. And I'm so excited, I mean, just the structure and knowing that we're all good on this is a huge win. So I really, yes, please let me know what you've heard. I'll try and, address all those as we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's it for city manager's report and our regular meeting. We will now adjourn into executive session. It is 7:09 PM, and we'll take a 10-minute break.
2 minutes, I promise.
City Council will recess for executive session on the 21st day of November 2023. Subject matter includes Texas Government Code 551.087, 551.071, and 551.072.